Welcome to the Pinning Combination Podcast. I'm KJ Pilcher alongside Hall of Fame coach and wrestler Dick Briggs, ready to talk a little wrestling at the high school and college level. Our first of 2025. Coach, do you have a good New Year?
Oh, yeah, it was great. My wife and I drove my in-laws' car down to Florida, and we got to spend a couple days down there. And they even got out on the golf course with my buddy Gordy, so had fun.
Wow. Fun time there. Pilcher household's quieted down now that one is going back to college and the other one's in the routine for school. But fun time there as well. You know, you mentioned golf. There's somebody joining us today. We're lucky to be joined by the voice of college wrestling. I think everybody will recognize our guest, an absolute institution when it comes to the sport of wrestling, and one of its great ambassadors, from the old Emerald Green wrestling room in the basement of Morning Sun to the Olympic stage. Tim Johnson, our guest today, and our first guest of 2025, has run the gamut of wrestling and has promoted the sport like no other. He's here to talk to us a little bit about something special that's going to start up here next week as far as television broadcasts. But Tim, thanks for joining us on the Pinning Combination Podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure, KJ and Dick. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's just jump right into let's talk a little bit about the origins. We mentioned, Morning Sun and the foundation of your wrestling career that's included, area teams will remember, area fans will remember your teams at Mount Vernon, where you coached a four-timer in Greg Randall at Mount Vernon. But the origins of Morning Sun, wrestling for the legendary Bob Dara. How did your foundation of wrestling really come to form, and what was that experience like for the former hallowed program of Morning Sun?
Well, first of all, it's just a pleasure to talk about wrestling. I mean, that's the DNA of our state, Iowa, and we're going to get to the main part here of the rebooting of college wrestling on Iowa PBS. I'm so excited about it, and just to be a part of it, because that's where it all started for me 39 years ago, or 38. This is my 39th year in broadcasting with Iowa Public Television back in 1986. And that's such an institution. Those of us that are our age, it's very exciting. But yes, and so therefore, as a native Iowan, I grew up in a farm town in Morning Sun, about 48 miles south of Iowa City, and in southeast Iowa. And coaches basically have had the biggest influence in my life. And when I was not quite 7 years old, I had a lawnmower accident. We had a brand new riding lawnmower on our farm that day, and just a dumb kid in tennis shoes, and they're still dew on the ground. And I ran up behind the lawnmower to scare the person that was driving it. And I slipped underneath, and a brand new blade sliced the leg off, bone, artery, nerves, except for a piece of skin. And we had a 17-year-old Eagle Scout working on the farm, and he saved my life, my leg and my life. And then in a small Burlington hospital, the doctor came in and said, let's try to save it. I was in the hospital 6 weeks. They didn't know whether it was going to be a stiff leg or not. And then university hospitals, 8 straight years with 8 operations. Well, that's where Coach Dara came in. He was, back then they called it PT. He now PE, but he was my PT teacher in first grade, right after I was in wheelchair for half that year. and he made me take PT in my wheelchair. And I mean, he just never let me make excuses. And yeah, I was on crutches every year, and he would have me race the kids, and he would tell me what a stud I was, and never let me make excuses. And he would get in the face. Dick knows, coach, but our new coach, but he would get in the face of kids that he thought was dogging it, and he'd say, "You let a cripple beat you in races," and things like that. And I'd stick my chest out, and I would have done anything for him. And he started the wrestling program right about that time in Morning Sun. He was actually he was the football, basketball, track and field, and baseball coach. Never had wrestled. And he just fell in love with the sport, opened a book, had it with him in practice. And he invited this elementary kid when I got higher up in the elementary to come and work out with the high school team down in the basement of Morning Sun. And he put courage into me. And he told me, as long as I wrestle, I'll be okay. Because I broke the same leg playing football in Sandlot football 2 years in a row. And the doctor said, "We know you love baseball and wrestling, Timmy, but you can't wrestle." And I thought Coach was going to, call me a word I can't say on this broad, but it's something like a sissy in front of a lot of people when I told him I couldn't play football. Because if you didn't play football in Morning Sun with Coach Dara, I thought you were dead to him. And he put his hand on my shoulder in a public place and said, "Timmy, as long as you wrestle, you'll be okay." And he turned a kid that was going up, likely to go upside down, right side up. And my life was changed, and I committed it to wrestling right then. And I knew at 12 years old, I wanted to be a coach because of a coach. And that was my start in Morning Sun. When Coach Dara left, he left before my high school. He coached me through 8th grade. He left me then and went to Urbandale and then to Dowling. And the rest is history as far as the Dowling deal. And then we were able to coach again together for the national juniors, what is Fargo today. And he and I and Jim Miller coached the national juniors team. And so we got back together, and I had the opportunity, just to kind of tie a bow on Coach Dara, I had the opportunity to represent his Morning Sundays and speak at his celebration of life at Simpson College, where he also coached a few years ago.
When did it become that wrestling was going to be a calling? After that start, you wear so many hats. Wrestler, coach, broadcaster, promoter, organize a lot of things. But after kind of getting embedded in the sport, when did it really seem like a calling?
That's a great question, KJ. Thanks for asking, because as I said, I knew that I wanted to be a coach when I was 12 years old because of a coach. Now, I'm 71 years old, and Dick and I have done life together for 50 years now. I met him in the Coe wrestling room when he came over from Jefferson to meet with his brother because he was sucking weight, and they just had to get out of the Jefferson room. Came over to the Coe wrestling room in 1974, and I met him there, and we've been doing life together for 50 years. So he knows that what I'm talking about. You evolve, you grow. And I wanted to coach, but a lot of it was for my own glory. And so, there was a lot of it was all about me. And then I continued to see the value, and my life was changed through surrendering, which is a weird word for a wrestler, but my life to Christ. And then I really saw that life is hard this side of heaven, and I live life with eternity in mind, and it's a life and death fight against the devil and all his angels. And all of a sudden I went, hey, America needs wrestling. I mean, and that's what America needs. I believe America needs Jesus, and America needs wrestling, because life's a fight. And so I see wrestling as such an important opportunity for kids. And if I was in high school wrestling again, I'd be demanding more space so I could get as many kids into that room. I was really good with the Greg Randalls and the wrestlers that wanted to give their life to wrestling. Now I would say I would do anything to get as many kids to just experience, because my son was a baseball player, and we were a baseball family, and I loved baseball. I just wasn't any good at it, but he was a better wrestler than I ever thought about being. And he wrestled 1 year in junior high, and he puts on his resume anytime it's there, a work ethic and mindset of a wrestler. And that's what I want to be a part of, is keeping our best coaches in the game of wrestling and helping put out more wrestlers into America. And I guess I'm going off on a tangent, but I would say right now that if more college coaches would come alongside CEOs and businesses and get internships, tell them to quit spending $20,000 or more on headhunters and invest in wrestling. Every year there'll be 6 to 10 of the best employees come out, because they know how to work, they know how to sacrifice. And so, KJ, the long answer to your question, it is truly a calling of mine that went from something that might bring me glory, why I wrestled, why I coached, to something that is ultimately, I think, a key to success in life and worth promoting.
Go ahead, Dick.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because that was kind of my mindset. I wanted to get as many kids into the room as possible and I wanted my numbers to be big, because I wanted them to be a part of something good in their life. Have that opportunity with the adult mentors that were the other coaches, and the peripheral people that come into rooms and such like that. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I want to go back a little bit to your history as well with wrestling, because we kind of stopped. You were at Morning Sun, then you went to Coe, then you were up at UNI for a little bit as a graduate assistant, then to Mount Vernon, and then down to the National Hall of Fame. Am I right? And then
USA Wrestling.
Oh, USA Wrestling, right? And then about that time is when you took over as the Olympic director of wrestling. Am I correct there? And so tell us a little bit about that experience as being the director of the Olympics.
Well, first of all, you go back to a very important point of life. Life's about relationships, as we know, Dick. And so I wrestled for Baron Bremner at Coe College. And then I went up to Northern Iowa to get my master's and was a graduate assistant in the athletic department. And your brother, Don, and the head coach, Chuck Patton, took me under their wings and embraced me and just said, hey, by whatever they were saying, they go, you got what it takes. We like you and we believe in you. And everything you talked about comes back to my relationship with Chuck Patton. Chuck Patton got me the job at Mount Vernon because he played golf in college with the AD and the principal. There were 100 applicants that were better than this kid with no experience, but the guy trusted and believed in Chuck Patton. Chuck Patton said, I think Tim Johnson would do the job for you. Then when the USA Wrestling was when Steve Combs was looking to hire their first full-time staff person, he said, I think Tim Johnson would do a good job. Well, I wasn't about to leave when he said that, because Greg Randall had one more year. And I wasn't going to walk out on that. And the next year they were still looking for that guy in 82. And so then I moved down to Stillwater, Oklahoma. And let me tell you, it's appropriate, the name, because if you're not involved with Oklahoma State, the name is appropriate. There's not much going on. But that's what the Lord had in mind. And he took me out of my circumstances. And that was my desert experience and where I developed a personal relationship with him. And then I had the opportunity to direct the Olympic Games. And basically, that's a really cool story. Peter Uberoth, the head of the Olympics, saved the Olympic movement. And nobody else even bid for the Olympics in '84 except America, because it had devastated Montreal. And it's always bid financially. And it's always bid 6 years ahead. And Peter Uberoth wanted to take his organization called the Young Presidents Organization. They're, great CEOs of high-level companies. And what he did was utilized all existing facilities in Southern California instead of building all these new ones and going into debt. And then he tapped CEOs of his in this organization, said, I want you to run this sport like you run your organization. And Gary Thompson was a lumber guy out of Newport Beach. And he came and he said, Gary, you wrestled in high school, yes? He said, I want you to travel the world for the next 2.5 years on your own expense, world championships, etc., and come back and run the best wrestling event ever. And he wanted to run it with all Southern California people, and they weren't doing well in wrestling. So Gary knew me as the national events director and came and said, we want Tim to come out and build the wrestling program. And I had 400 people to hire, or volunteers, didn't pay many people, but we turned the Anaheim Convention Center across from Disneyland into the wrestling venue. And I had the opportunity, I moved out there and I had the opportunity to oversee and direct the Olympics, and it went off great. And the Olympics were the best, financially ever. And it was a cool thing to be a part of. And then I went on, just to finish the Chuck Patton deal, I went on and wondered if I could do anything but wrestling. I became the CEO of the Wichita YMCAs. And that was, I cut my teeth on staff, fund, and board development there. And that's when Chuck Patton calls me and said, TJ, I'm moving. I moved to the Pacific Northwest. I tried coming back and forth. He was the color analyst for Iowa Public Television with the play-by-play Doug Brown. And he said, I can't do it anymore. I just told him. And if you know CP, he just told him. and then they said, well, who? And it couldn't be a current coach, or else they would have hired Dick, and Dick was at Jefferson at the time. But he said, Tim Johnson would do a great job. And I went in, they said, well, let's give it a try. And for 20 years, I was on Iowa Public Television. So life's about relationships. And in this case, almost everything I've ever done, there's a line or a dotted line that goes back to Chuck Patton.
Awesome. Now things are kind of coming full circle. You mentioned that start, of course, Iowa PBS, bringing back college wrestling. You and Jim Miller, the former Wartburg coach, UNI wrestler that many people know and love. You guys are bringing back college wrestling to that format starting next week, January 16th, with a duel between University of Nebraska Kearney, the Division II power, and of course the NAIA power, Grandview. Tim, what does it mean to have wrestling back on that platform?
Well, it is so exciting. And Doug Brooker, the longtime producer, coordinating producer of Iowa Public Television from its start until its end, basically. And then my Big Ten, I've been in the Big Ten network now for 18 years, and he was the producer at the first 10 years of that, and now he's retired. But he and I have been talking about this for a while and wondering when the right time to approach Iowa PBS. And there was new leadership, and he said, TJ, I think this is a good opportunity. What do you think would work? Because we had to quit because all the big matches, Iowa Public Television really focused on, the state schools, Iowa State, and UNI. And through Big Ten Network and the streaming, Iowa Public Television, was kind of left out. And so I said, hey, the farmers are going to come in from the chores for any kind of wrestling. And I said, let's focus on small college wrestling, because a lot of those guys, a lot of those teams have so many Iowa kids from all the different schools, and it's such good wrestling. I mean, the talent is, so great. Let's talk about national champions like Dick's son Kyle at Wartburg, and it's just so much fun. And then he said, well, what do you think? I said, well, how do you do small college without having Jim Miller? And Jim and I go almost as far back as Dick and I. I mean, we go back to my graduate assistant days at UNI, and that's a funny story. I mean, I can tell it real fast. He comes down from Riceville, and he tells Chuck Patton, I need a workout. All I can work out with is high school kids. He said, come on down, but he got there late. There I was in the room. He said, well, hey, go over and wrestle with our graduate assistant. And as Miller tells it, I went over there for a workout, and after the workout, I still needed a workout. And, I mean, I really do remember touching him, and I went, oh my gosh, this is a different animal. And we became fast friends and have been. He was the best man at my wedding. I was the best man at his. And so I said, hey, I mean, the guy, has won 10 NCAA Division III titles as a coach at Wartburg. Boy, there's the guy that everybody needs to hear. And I can go back to my play-by-play, and we can make a big deal about Iowa wrestling, the state, and these towns, and where are they now, and stuff like that. So we pitched it. They loved it. And they're already talking about next year. So
really,
one of my philosophies is if it's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. Now, what I mean is, if it's worth doing, get off the dime and do it. And we're doing it the best we can, but I'm sure we're going to find out how much better we can do it. And so they've already done a couple of things, an article on Jim and I and our roots. They're doing a special video that's going to be really cool. And then we're going to do some neat things, and it's going to be really exciting. So you got the Kearney Grandview to kick it off. And what Nick Mitchell has done there, who is a protege of Jim Miller, Grandview is amazing. Then we're coming your way on the 21st, and we'll be at my alma mater. John Ostenberg, so excited. He wants to pack the gym. It's funny. We said, hey, are there cheerleaders? We didn't, but the coordinating producer said it. And some of them have them. And one, I don't know which one, but one said, no, we don't. But by the time you come to put us live on TV, we're going to have a cheerleading program. And the bands and all this kind of stuff. So Coe will host Loris on the 21st. And then the Battle of the Bergs, Wartburg and Augsburg, later in the month. And then Central's going to go up to Luther. And then we're going to call a women's match between William Penn and Grandview. 5 straight weeks, 5 midweek meets. And I couldn't be more excited. And I guess that's a good thing.
The thing that makes me excited is, I mean, obviously we can see your enthusiasm and excitement right now in this podcast, but Jim Miller's the same way. He just brings it, and he brings that Waterloo kind of flair, dudes and
do it anyway.
That's right, do it anyway. And all his little Millerisms, and so it's going to be exciting. I'm so excited to see it too. And I'm going to go off. I got to go in another direction. Maybe KJ wants to come back, but I wanted to go. You've mentored a lot of announcers through the years, and you did one earlier this year that was kind of a lower level, and I really appreciated that. And then you've also done it all the way up to Jordan Burroughs and everything in between. And so, maybe tell us a couple of those mentors that you've done, and then what's that entail? What do you do to help those guys?
Well, thank you for that, because again, we evolve as people, and it's one of my greatest desires now to help. And back when I was a selfish, arrogant, think of myself only type of guy, that's who I was. And I'm thankful that now I've always said that it's only logical that our greatest value to society should be in our 70s. And because of all the mistakes you make in the past and the opportunity to wax on the wisdom you have now. And one of my things that I would like to help is to help emerging and, broadcasters. And so, it started back when, we went to a guy named Dan Gable and said, "Hey, we'd like you to be a broadcaster." And that's when he was rubbing his hands and when he said, "Everything I've ever done, I want to be best. I'm going to have to have a lot of coaching, but I want to be the best I can be." And then he points at me, and it was just four of us sitting there in his chalet office behind his house north of Iowa City. And he says, "Timmy, you're good, but you can be better." And I went, "Oh yeah." I mean, I was 45 years old at the time, and that still rings in my head. And so I suppose I mentored Dan for a while, and that was that. He kept calling Iowa we, and I said, "This is Iowa Public Television. It's not we, Dan. It's Iowa." And then we brought Jim Gibbons in, and that combination was so great for me because I was the play-by-play, and I just say, "What do you think, Jim? What do you think, Dan?" And then Jim has become one of the greats, and then. I right now, what you're talking about is the Iowa State had to be on streaming this coming from ESPN last time, but programming and the whole bit, it had to be on Big Ten Plus, and that's student run. And they called me and said, "Would you help these students?" And I had to think about it. I even talked to you about it, Dick. I mean, you go, man, that could go south real fast. And and I said, "Well, what am I here for now?" And so I went and I was the analyst. I helped the play-by-play and the sideline. I thought they were really good. They were just really open. And you said, "How?" Dick, it's the same thing you do. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I do know that God's gifted me with the gift of encouragement. So I just encourage people. Now, when they know you're for them and you were truly encouraging them, you can point out things that they can get better at. And so things like less is more is a big one. Less is more is a big one. But if they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so, Dick, to answer your question, I see myself as an encourager and a coach that sets up opportunities to help them improve in how they prepare. I talk to them, how do they prepare and how they deliver and to be concise and clear, get in and out, but they accept it when they know that you're for them. And so I'm mentoring a guy named Zach Mackey. This will be our second year as him play-by-play on the Big Ten Network. And he graduated from Iowa. Now he's the voice of Virginia Tech athletics, but he's really good. And so this will be the second year. I'm kind of that mentoring guy, and Shane and Jim are on the other because we show so much on the Big Ten. And then Shane, Jim, and I get back together for the Big Ten championships. And then I'm the morning guy now on ESPN with Sean, and I really enjoy that. But yes, Jordan Burroughs, I think, is fantastic. And my new job is the hardest, man. I mean, if he's going to talk about how he needed a workout after our workout, I mean, my biggest probably job now is mentoring Jim Miller as my sidekick.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Okay, as a follow-up to it, you mentioned preparation. So I have to ask this. I was always curious because some of your broadcasts are on site and some of them are remote. So what kind of preparation do you do for each of those? And is it a little bit more difficult to do remotely, or?
It is only because you better have some things tightened up where you might be able to lean over and say, "Coach, is that who's going right now?" If they introduce two, you can't do that when you're in the studio. So today, preparation, I'll be on here in an hour and a half or so with Coach Clemson from Maryland for a conference call with Zach and I. And tomorrow we'll be on with Sean Barnett, and I'm doing Maryland at Michigan on Friday, and it's remote. Guys, tell me if you have anyone else planned for that. I mean, we can see, but I've made mistakes and we've called the wrong person. We did Iowa State. And I depend on the play-by-play, but there was an example of us not crossing our T's and dotting our I's. So that's really important. But I do like it because I'm sitting in jeans, and I don't, I live in Champaign. I drive up to Chicago and back. It's an easy travel, but there's nothing like being in Carver or Bryce Jordan or somewhere where it's 1 versus 2 and it's packed. And I think we talked a little bit on the agenda. I mean, there's never been louder Carvers and Hiltons when Dave Ozenbaugh pins Lou Bannock back in the early days. Brooks Simpson pins Eric Voker to win for Iowa in an upset, and the place is roaring. When you're the announcer there, and I was for that second one, I mean, it's electric, and there's nothing like it. So I like them both. And the preparation, the thing that probably surprised me the most in preparation when Doug Brown, such a mentor of mine, Doug Brown mentored me and he encouraged me, and he was just such a delight, had a tender way about him, and much more than myself. But I was always surprised by the amount of preparation that ended up on the floor, because you have to prepare with a whole lot more information than you're going to actually present. And that's the key.
One thing I want to ask you, so I just turned 50. So I was a teenager in the late 80s, and then I wrestled Cedar Rapids, Washington, in the early 90s. But IPTV then was such an institution that we couldn't wait to watch the college duels. Unfortunately, I had to watch the state wrestling tournament that way instead of being there in person. But you guys had such an indelible impact on fans and wrestlers alike that would tune in, for the Sunday duels or big events. Was it clear, did that come into focus for you, that just how big of an impact that you were making on not just the current fan, but generations over the time that you were doing those broadcasts for, like you mentioned before, Tim, this is a sport that's ingrained in the fabric of the state and means so much to people from one corner of the state to the other.
It's a great question, and timing's everything. I would say that yes, a little bit, because we did a VHS subscription deal that people really did have to wait. There was no internet. We were the only ones doing this.
Right.
That's why I'm the longest running and probably will be the TV announcer, because nobody else was doing it. And people would come up to me at the NCAAs and thank me because they subscribed. They'd wait to get their videotape. They'd get their kids in Florida and California, and they'd watch the only thing they could watch. And so, I mean, I was blown away. And I wasn't, after the first couple of experiences, I wasn't going to miss an NCAA with as many people coming up and patting me on the back. I got ego like anybody else. And that was, what? And then, of course, Iowa, they're, like I said, farmers came in from the chores and nobody was going to miss it. And it was just really cool. And so that's another good question. A point that you make there is, the freshmen that come into college now are better than, the freshmen that used to come into college. Okay. The wrestlers of tomorrow are better than the wrestlers of today. Why is that? Well, because of the access. Now you can, internet, you can get anything, the Russians, any match out there, you can get, you have a network, and then there's more places to get training. And the access is so different. We were the only access at the time. And we were the reason people got involved in wrestling or actually used it for technique. And so you make a great point, KJ. It would never happen that way again. But in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that was pretty cool. And I just had the opportunity to be a part of it.
Now, I always kind of tip my cap to Dick because he's given back to the sport. He was a competitor, a coach, an official, a media member. You've done the same thing as well. Is there one role that you have enjoyed more than the other? Or is there one that makes you kind of swell up a little bit and say, you know what, this is what has given me maybe the most joy out of all those hats that you've worn?
Well, I'm going to well up because the greatest hat I wear is being a friend of Dick's. We have a song that we sing back and that we send back and forth from 50 years ago or so by Andrew Gold. Thank you for being a friend. Thank you for being a friend. And, it says, traveled the road and back again. And, something about take a bow, Dick, because you're such a great friend and he feels the same about me. And so I do believe life's about relationships and there's no greater role. I mean, I just got back to, relationships, whether it's family or friends. I mean, I've got my son-in-law, Kyle Rochelle, is the head coach at Chattanooga. Otto's 3 and Bear is 6. Bear Rochelle. You think that's going to scare a few people on a bracket? And I just got back from the Southern Scuffle where Chattanooga had their first ever individual champion at the Southern Scuffle. And I enjoy that relationship with my son-in-law. I'm helping him understand what it means to be a CEO of a Division I program. And we put a plan together and the whole bit. I love being a grandpa. And that's great. But my role as a friend of Dick Briggs and our circle of friends, Nick Hobbs, Mike Smith, Jim Miller. That's my favorite role. And so the friendships, I mean, I have a list of hundreds that I pray for, KJ, and 75% of them are from the wrestling world. And so the relationships from being a competitor, and I still pay. Nick Hobbs and I wrestled together at Morning Sun. Then we coached at the same time. Him at Regina, me at Mount Vernon, him at Charles City. He brought Charles City their first and only state championship. Our first state champion, Al Baxter, was at Buena Vista, as you know. You wrestled for him. And yep. Morning Sun. And then you go to coaching. And Randy Majors and Paul Hufford and I were just texting last night. And then Dave Ryan, the sire of the Ryans, he and I were just
Ryan clan.
And by the way, he watches all your podcasts, he says.
Does he really?
Yes, he does. He watches all your podcasts. And I just said, well, I want Mikey. I want to be the first dibs for Mikey at Chattanooga. And I think he's quite an athlete. And sure. and then you go to USA Wrestling and the opportunity to lead. And now the relationships that I have in broadcasting with Shane Sparks and Jim and Zach, and then Jordan and Sean Kenny and all these people. So there's the role. Being, I like, this is one of my favorite words, KJ, permeate. I don't know why. It's just the way relationships permeate through every part of my wrestling. And I can't wait to see I don't know what it's going to look like, but I can't wait to see what now the Lord has for me in my 70s in my relationships and wrestling.
See, I want to piggyback on that because I think it's very timely because at the Soldier Salute, I did a story following up the tournament on a lot of the former Iowa wrestlers that are coaching at other programs. And a lot of them talked about how, when they had a free moment, it was great to, even though they're focused on their wrestlers, they've got other irons in the fire and they're not as close as they were when they were in the room together, but they share that bond, have going through the workouts and, the blood, sweat, tears, and they're able to pick up right where they left off, even though Brett Metcalf and Jake Cadle hadn't talked, in years. They run into each other and they pick up right where they left off because they share that bond. You mentioned the relationships in wrestling. I think the sport fosters this connection between people in the sport that I don't think it's replicated in other sports. And it's the same with guys that I wrestled with at Buena Vista. We may not see each other throughout the year, but we run into each other at the state tournament in Des Moines. And it's like we're 20, 21 years old, getting done with a morning workout in our 2-a-day phase in January.
Yeah, I totally agree, KJ. I mean, and now the thing about it is, Dick and I try to be purposeful about it. So we're all going to be planning our golf trip down to the lake. But there is a difference between what we did 40 years ago at the lake at night and how we play. Yeah, and how we are now so think, oh, we're going to have some euchre and all this. We're too tired to even play euchre, and we're in bed at 9. And but we love our golf, and Dick and I are going to play 36 holes still. So that's pretty cool. But that's being purposeful in staying in those relationships. And actually, right now, there's a group that gets together of wrestling guys at the Wildwood Saloon the first Wednesday of every month, and they're getting together right now, and I've been able to be with them from Gable to Brad Smith. Nick Hobbs coordinates it, and you know why they get together? Because they just like getting together. And I suppose, and Dick knows, I can wear people out. And I would imagine we're going overtime right now, and I don't want to wear anybody out. But I do have, because of your title, you do have to hear my favorite all-time wrestling story. Dick knows what's coming.
Please,
pinning
share it.
Pinning combination. So what was my favorite pinning combination? Well, I was a cripple, and I had to get I had to do things upper body, and so my favorite combination. My pinning combination of all time was a full Nelson. And you go, full Nelson? How could that be?
Yeah, right. It's illegal.
It wasn't in 1976. 1 year in college. It was an Olympic year, and they wanted to promote the Olympics. That's my senior year. And I put a few guys out in practice because they got so mad. Jay Struve got so mad at me for putting full Nelson on him, and I just wrecked his neck. And he's a wonderful guy. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we're at the Cohawk Invitational. I'm wrestling a guy from Northwest Missouri State. Nick's over against the wall. He was a 2-time national runner-up for Coe. He's my teammate. My mom's in the stand. My sister's in the stands. My former boss in Iowa City, Harvey Luther for Johnson County, is in the stands. And Barron's sitting in the corner. And I go out, and I take him down, and I put him on I take him down, and then he comes back up. And anyway, with about a minute left in the first period, now I had to get these. My roommate Jim Bruck used to say if the matches in college would have been 1-1-1, Tim would have been a national champion, but they weren't. And so anyway, he dropped his head. I saw it. I sunk that full Nelson in, and I cranked him over. Oh, I'm going to get this thing over. This is great. First round of the Cohawk Invitational. I'm going to get this thing over in the first period. With about 30 seconds left, man, I've had him pinned. I'm going, man, seems like he's pinned. With about 25 seconds left, I go, ref, he's pinned. Golly, what do you need? And the old ref goes something like this. It was probably Bob Kroll. I never liked him. And, but anyway, goes like that. And finally, with about 10 seconds left, I'm going, I'm getting worn out here. And I crank and I go, he's pinned. He's pinned. I've never heard this before. Never heard it since. The gymnasium, everybody, all of a sudden you hear this, I'm pinned. I'm pinned. He screamed. Nick did a backflip. Barron started laughing. I saw that. The ref didn't call it. I'm ahead 8-0. I remember that. So I don't know. After the first, true to form, I crawl off the mat at the end of the entire match that went 3 periods, I won 8-7. And, but you know, I used to tell that story all the time just because it was a great story. Now I tell it because, as you can tell, and I'll just say, until we basically say and get our ego out of the way, I'm pinned. I can't do life on my own. You're not going to find the success. And so, I mean, there came a time in my life I said I'm pinned. I thought he was a loser. And until we say I'm pinned, and we live life vertically and horizontally for others, and that's a hard thing for wrestling, but it's a good picture, I think. And so hopefully you'll never forget that pinning combination on your show.
Oh, that's a good one. Tim, I'd just like to thank you very much for joining us. Want to remind everybody that's viewing today, Tim Johnson, Jim Miller will be part of Wrestling Back on Iowa PBS. You'll be able to view that live stream on Facebook at facebook.com/Iowa PBS, on YouTube, youtube.com/@Iowa PBS, and then, of course, on the station's website, www.iowapbs.org/shows/college wrestling. An institution returns January 16th with the first of 5 duels. Tim, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for all that you do for the sport of wrestling. One of the great ambassadors of the sport, and one of the great people overall involved in wrestling.
Thank you, Dick and KJ, for being my friends.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. We love you.
Tim Johnson, you know, goes without saying, everybody is so familiar. As we mentioned, the voice of college wrestling. He's done it all from high school to the Olympics. You know, from Iowa Public Television and Iowa PBS now to ESPN, worldwide leader. Boy, can you think of anybody that combines that ambassadorship, his faith, and just being an all-around good person like Tim Johnson?
Man, he's certainly at the top, but there's so many in the sport of wrestling, and even the guys that he's mentored.
Yes.
On that throughout, that we still see. Shane Sparks. There's a guy that might equal TJ, and all of those a lot of other guys. But he mentioned one of the really neat things, pinnacles of being involved in wrestling. Kind of for me the same thing, and it's about the relationships that we make and that we continue to enjoy within your life, and it's just fun. And that's why I love being involved in wrestling, either behind the whistle or behind the microphone. And it's just fun to stay connected with that. And, it's just, I don't want to give it up. I have too many friends, it's just so fun. So anyway, that's a neat thing that he brought up for sure.
Right. Oh yeah. And 2 really quick points here about the return of wrestling to Iowa PBS, the first time since 2012, I believe they're going to carry wrestling. One, I'm glad that people in the state will have that. You can catch wrestling a ton of different ways, and there's a lot of streaming services. They're high school. We broadcast dual meets at the high school level, but for that, I mean, there's nothing like it. Even with stuff on Fox and the BTN and things that you can go back and watch. There's nothing like sitting in front of the television, like on a Sunday afternoon or what have you, for an IPTV duel, and Tim was a big part of that. Also, this is a spotlight on, obviously for for deservedly so, a lot of focus is always on Division One. However, wrestling at all levels is so good, and D2, D3, and the IA, those guys, those men and women are just as devoted and dedicated, and it's a great product.
Yep.
And you know that very well. It deserves a spotlight, and I'm glad that that's the focus with returning the sport to Iowa PBS.
And the bonus with that is it's free.
Yeah.
Iowa PBS, and then also if you want to go watch those Division II or Division III schools, most of them have a service that's free. You can go on their website, go to their schedule, and click on watch, and it's free. So I mean, I do that all the time, and I love watching the competition at that level. And for us, KJ, a lot of times it's Iowa kids, Iowa high school kids that we've watched for many years, and so and we get that at the college level. After I was up to meet last week with Nebraska and UNI, and after the meeting was over, went up and talked to Wyatt a little bit after his big win, at the 197. So, and Wyatt Volker, a real nice young man. So that's the fun for us. And like I said, it's free. You can go watch it, and you're gonna. I'll tell you what. Johnson and Miller will bring it because they're.
Oh, I know.
They're fun.
And the amount of knowledge that the two of them have could be sensory overload for the average fan, but really excited to watch those two together starting next Thursday, January 16th. That's going to be fun. Out of those 5 duels, is there one that stands out?
I'm anxious for the Coe Loris one because it's in town, and I'd likely be at Coe rather than watching PBS, but I'll have to rewatch it, I guess, online or whatever.
Sure. I thought maybe the Battle of the Berg, since
I've been to many of those. That's all. I mean, that's a big deal. So absolutely, yes. On that one for sure.
So we've run pretty long. Let's kind of get to some of the college and high school stuff from last week and take a quick look at what's coming up. Obviously, the big one, the Soldier Salute over the break. To start off with, then we'll talk about UNI and their notable win here this last week. But the University of Iowa wins the Soldier Salute. No surprise there. Excuse me. 7 titles for the Hawkeyes. Drake Ayala at 133. Kyle Parko at 49. Michael Caliendo at 165. Patrick Kennedy at 74. Stephen Buchanan at 197, Ben Keeter at heavyweight, Angelo Ferrari with a medical forfeit in the finals at 184 against Gabe Arnold, so we didn't see the showdown between those two Hawks. UNI finishes second. I believe they had 10 medalists overall, but kind of looking, there's some good performances. Kyle Parko with a win over number 6, Lachlan McNeil of North Carolina. Patrick Kennedy, very impressive in his title run. But what's the main thing that stands out to you from those performances?
Well, for me, I have some frustrations. One, I wish there was more teams that brought their full lineups because Iowa obviously had theirs. I believe Navy had theirs. I think that most of the other schools were spotty as to with their varsity wrestlers coming in. So they were kind of using it in some cases. If they had 2 or 3 kids that were vying for a spot, let's just say 125, they'd bring in all 3 of those kids to see how they did and use that as a barometer as to who might be varsity from here on out, sort of thing. So you got that, and then the other frustration, and I know this is probably shared around the country, was that we didn't get to see the final match at 184 with Ferrari and Arnold, and for me, I was looking forward to that before the meet ever started, and then I get that they need to do that in house or whatever, but it's still frustrating. I don't, and that's part of that happens a lot in wrestling, not just Iowa, but other teams, and it could be one team against the other, not just within your team. So we're guarding seeds for the national tournament, and I'm like, come on, let's just wrestle and have fun and show our sport. But so I'm frustrated with that as well. So but some great. Did you mention Kyson Caratina?
I did not. I missed that.
Champion for Iowa State. So it's good to see him back out on the mat. So and he looked good. It's I think that's going to help the Cyclones a lot there. So
yeah, he had a really nice performance winning the 125-pound title. You and I had a few that placed third, including Jared Seaman, 74, and I think 74 was one of those instances for you and I where it was him and Nick Fox maybe use the Soldier Salute as a way to kind of iron out starter there. I know Colin Robuto was third at 149, and Trevor Anderson.
Trevor Anderson. There you go. Sorry. Yep.
Was third at 125, and I think 49 you had Allard and a couple others in the field as well. So that might have been another example of what you were mentioning with kind of using it as a way to kind of hash out starting spots for sure.
Right, and I think that showed itself at the Nebraska meet. A week later, whatever it was, with Anderson stepping up at 125 and Sema at 74, and so I think that's probably what happened. That helped Coach Schwab determine who he was going to put out on the mat, and boy, did it pay off.
It certainly did. One last thing from the Soldier Salute. Iowa's women's team, they also won the team title there at Extreme Arena. They had 5 champions as well, and also a couple head-to-heads in the championships. Brianna Gonzalez, she was first at 117. And then Cadence Didich was first at 138. At 145, you had that head-to-head where Macy Kilty defeated Riesler Mendy. What a great problem to have when you have 2 quality wrestlers like that at the same weight. Both of them will probably be going in the postseason. But Kilty comes away with a title there at 145. Kennedy Blades, who was named the outstanding wrestler on the women's division, she won at 160. She had a 13-3 win over Latifah McBride of Life. And of course, if you follow women's wrestling, you know the McBride sisters for life, outstanding NAIA performers. So that was a big win, and to do it in dominant fashion was impressive. And then Kylie Welker at 180 comes away with a title, faced Naomi Simon, the former Decorah champ, in the finals. Welker with a technical fall there. And that was one of, 3, 4, 5 technical falls and a pin for Welker. So outstanding performance there as the women advance to they'll get back into action this weekend with the National Wrestling Coaches Association multi-divisional duels at the Unidome. And speaking of UNI, they're hosting the NWCA duels, and they're coming off a huge win against Nebraska, a top 10 battle, first win over Nebraska since 1991. But could you have drawn out or scripted a better performance Sunday than what UNI actually produced?
Well, actually, no, and it was just this close to being 9 wins to 1 loss with a couple of real Butos. I thought there were 3 instances in his match where he should have gotten near fall counts.
Near fall points, yeah.
And so that would have been just one of those would have been the difference in the match because he lost by a point. And then Sema gave up a takedown with 4 seconds left. And it's like, if we could just held on to those. So we were so close. I mean, what a great performance by the Panthers. They came out and they did not back down. They were tough to take down. They fought every instance. And even when they did get taken down, which they did in a number of matches in the first takedown of the match, they battled back and came from behind and won. So man, that was fun meet to be at.
You mentioned that moment with Sema giving up the late takedown to Lenny Pinto. But that was really one of the only times where it wasn't UNI getting that clutch takedown or key move. I mean, and you even mentioned it too, right from the get-go. Caleb Smith in on Trevor Anderson, and it looks like Smith has Anderson dead to rights twice before the first stoppage, and Anderson is able to fend it off, and that almost, Trevor Anderson in the post meet said, he likes being that guy. He takes pride in being that guy to kind of set the tone a little bit. I think right there that set the tone that said, hey, we're going to fight and scrap for every single point, every single position, every single move. And that just kind of snowballed because after that, Smith, they had that stoppage with the clock, but Smith didn't really threaten too much the rest of the match. And Anderson had the only takedown. But, man, it was a moment like that really kind of set the tone a little bit for UNI.
Right, and you could see with this win, the bench was up, the coaches were up, the fans were up, the whole arena was. I mean, and you're right, and that's the guy you want setting the tone for the day. And it just, you could see the rest of his teammates that were going to, the 9 others that were going to take the mat. That's just, you just love that as a coach and as a fan, I loved it. I'm looking down, going, this is going to be good. And I knew UNI on paper, based on rankings, UNI was probably favored in 4 matches. Really? But they were so close that they just had to get an upset. Well, this one wasn't one of the close ones. He was ranked 5th. UNI beat 4 number 5 or better ranked kids in that meet, and that was one of them. So I think Anderson might be 31st or something like that in one of the rankings, and he beat the number 5 guy. So that was definitely a big win for UNI.
Yeah, and it just seemed like they kept passing the baton to the next guy. Happel at 141 gave up. I think he was down 4-0 at one time, and then locked up that cradle in the second period. He was able to hold on 7-5, and then Ryder Downey, that big. I should mention that Happel was one of those guys. Toss-up match against the guy that was ranked slightly higher in Brock Hardy. And he comes away with a win. And then Downey at 157, big overtime takedown, sudden victory takedown to beat number 3 Antrell Taylor 5-2. They had a big scrap in Las Vegas as well. But number 5 Downey, I tell you what, he really opened eyes about the midpoint of last season till the end, and that was an impressive win for him.
I was very close to Matt's side for that match. I was kind of bouncing around, talking to my old teammates that are in the stands and just having fun. But so I got to look at Ryder, and I got to tell you, I'm going, oh boy, Ryder had expended a lot of energy early on in that match, and I'm thinking, oh, I don't know if he's got enough. But the kid never backed down. He might have looked tired, but he did not wrestle tired. And so maybe that's how he is all the time. But so to get that takedown in overtime, when I was thinking he was tired, I'm going, I don't know if overtime favors us. Oh, he's so gritty. I just love that takedown. That was good.
Yeah, and then they come back from the break, and Jack Thompson, with an overtime victory as well. So they bracket the intermission with those exciting overtime wins. But the big one, Parker Keckeisen against Silas Allred, 184, hitting that cradle. Kind of reminded me, I think he did that to Hidlay on the edge of the mat in the collegiate duels a year or two ago. But, man, he pounced on that opportunity, and that was huge in this duel.
Right, got that at near side cradle, and then they reverse roll and pop the shoulder out, and it was flat. There was no question on that. So,
right,
and I read somewhere online some of the comments that it was from an Oklahoma State fan, and he said, easily my favorite non-cowboy wrestler in the nation. And,
it's hard not to like what he does.
Yeah.
We've mentioned it multiple times that the way that he wrestles, and his demeanor too, the total package there with Parker Keckeisen, and that's that kind of performance is what really endears him to other fans. That one, he's a dynamo when it comes to constant attacking and offense, and then he can pull something like that out and hit it. I mean, gosh, no doubt why he's a favorite to people that don't even wear purple.
Right, and I if he makes the finals and Strozzi make the finals of the Nationals, I'm guessing the arena is going to be pulling for purple.
Probably. I think you might be right on that one. The other thing with Keckeisen, and maybe I'm off here, but he kind of jumped up and gave kind of just a little bit of a celebration, and kind of gave a thumbs up to somebody in the crowd, and that excitement and that energy was a little something, a little added element, I think, from him as well, that really kind of punctuated the moment and the situation.
Right, and you don't usually see that out of him. He's workmanlike, and he when it happens, he expected it to happen, so he's not too excited. But to show that can tell you what that meant to those wrestlers and how important this meet was and the momentum that they were riding on right there.
For sure. And then one of our former area preps, Wyatt Volker, had a come from behind win, really dominated the third period at 197 to officially seal the victory. And then Lance Runyon continuing his good work at heavyweight with a win there as well to cap off the duel.
Right. And Wyatt did a nice
2049.
job. Yeah. Wyatt did a nice job of fending off a takedown attempt. That was just one of those scrambles, and he did a good job to win it by a point. So, and I've always been impressed with, with Runyon. I went out and he got taken down, and I went, it was purely on size. He just kind of got bowled over, and that was it. That was the end of scoring there for at least significant scoring from the Nebraska side. So Runyon did a good job as well.
So UNI improves to 4-0 overall, 2-0 in the Big 12 Conference. They now have wins over South Dakota State, Missouri, and Nebraska, which very impressive resume going forward. And, of course, they'll be at home again here Friday and Saturday with the National Wrestling Coaches Association multi-divisional national duels. And the significance there is there's the return of a Division I bracket. UNI is one of 14 D1 teams in the field. That includes South Dakota State, University of Arkansas at Little Rock, Northern Colorado, Wyoming, Penn, George Mason, Ohio, Cal Poly, Drexel, Cal Bakersfield, Central Michigan, Southern Illinois at Edwardsville, and Sacred Heart. But just the fact that there's a D1 bracket again, filled with mid majors. I like that addition to the NWCA event that'll have men and women, JUCO through NCAA D1, D2, D3s.
And I haven't looked at the lineups this year at some of these schools, but Little Rock has a couple All-Americans, right? Returning. And then UNC has a national champ from 2 years ago.
Alvarez.
And then so you're going to have some quality wrestlers there. I really respect the coaches that are bringing their teams to this national duel. And I imagine UNI will be seeded first. South Dakota State will be seeded second. And then, so I don't know. With 14 teams, I would probably guess. I don't know if they would probably not have a first round match, right? Meet.
Right.
With, two teams have to have buys, so I'm guessing those two would probably get the buys.
Yeah, and remember, if UNI and SDSU do meet in the finals, or meet anywhere along the way, really, we wrestled at the Unidome this year, and that came down to criteria. So it's going to be it's going to be fun up there over the course of the 2 days. Of course, I think a lot of people remember how Iowa and North Central came down to essentially just 1 point separation. They battled at the North Central Open already, and the women's field promises to, you'll probably have Kings there as well. So that promises to be a fun field as well.
Right. Pretty much all of our Division III, well, I don't know if all of them, but the ones in our area, and then also Upper Iowa and Division II are going to be competing at it. So it's a fun event. I've been to it a number of times, and when it was in Indiana and then down in Nashville, and Louisville, and one of the Bills. And anyway, it's just a fun event. You can just bounce between, and the different meets that are going on. It's usually about down in Louisville. There was about 30 mats that they had out. I don't know how many they'll have on the dome floor, but
Dick Simmons mentioned that to me. I want to say 32 came to mind.
That sounds right.
That they might have 36 mats laid down, but up to 32 mats with action on it at a given time.
Yep. It's almost overwhelming, so you have to focus in on what you like to see.
Oh, no, for sure it can be. I was just looking to see if they have released brackets yet.
They didn't believe so. They hadn't before our broadcast. I looked right before we started. So
right. No brackets yet. But some of the teams, Augsburg at the D3 level, Augsburg will be there. University of Wisconsin Lacrosse, Coe, Cornell will be there as well. University of Dubuque will be there. Loras, Luther, on the D2 side, obviously Upper Iowa, but then you'll have, national powers like Central Oklahoma will be there as well. Indianapolis will be there. So, Nebraska Kearney, we mentioned them being on IPTV. They dueled at UNI already. they'll be there. So, you've got some of the best programs across the country at various levels there at the Unidome. So, men, women, both will be stacked fields. So it should be awesome as always.
Yeah, it's worth it. So I'm rough on Saturday, so I won't be able to be up there. But likely to get up there on Friday.
So let's. Any other college comments or anything from that level? I know Iowa opens its Big 10 slate on Sunday at Wisconsin. Just looking at the probable lineups really quickly. You got Cale Peterson back down to 125. He was at 133 for the Soldier Salute, but him and Joey Cruz are listed at 25. 41, no Ryder Block. He didn't wrestle at the Soldier Salute, but you have Jace Rhodes and Colin Shriver there. Miguel Estrada's at 157, even though after the Soldier Salute, Tom Brand said they like Ja'Cory Teemer's progress, and they expect him to join the lineup sometime during the Big Ten season. You've got Patrick Kennedy at 174. You have Arnold and Ferrari both at 184. So those are kind of the notable things from the projected lineup released yesterday.
And I'm still wondering if Ferrari will redshirt. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But and it would make sense.
And that's one thing.
It would make sense because
one thing Tom Brand said is.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say one thing Tom Brand said is that they have time, that they're not in a hurry to make a decision, which kind of surprises me because I just would assume that, it would seem like a logical move to redshirt Ferrari, and you have Gabe Arnold that's, an outstanding wrestler too, that but you don't know what's going on.
Right.
Nelson Brands hasn't been in the lineup. Maybe there's, something with injury or illness, at 184 as well that might factor into things. So, they keep a lot of things close to the chest there in Iowa City. So, we won't know until we know, I guess.
And we don't know who's better between Ferrari and Arnold. We didn't get to see that, but
that's true. We don't.
184 is just in the country with Strorochi, a senior, Kakaisen, a senior. Who else am I missing there? That's the third rank. That's also a senior.
Dustin Plott,
a senior, and then so Arnold can't redshirt. He already did, and so. Unless the NCAA changed the rules again, I don't know anymore.
Well, it's only Wednesday, so it might change by the end of the week. You never know with the NCAA.
So it would make sense since Ferrari still has a redshirt year to do that if they but who knows if it means the difference between winning or not winning a national title, you can bet he will be in there.
For sure.
So. Now, a couple other things on the college side. Iowa State wrestles West Virginia tonight, Wednesday, and then they wrestle on Saturday. Ryder and Bucknell. But speaking of Iowa State, they wrestled in the collegiate duels. I'll do this briefly. They beat Rock Haven 30-6. They beat North Carolina 23-14. They lost to Ohio State 29-10. However, they did not wrestle Bastida, Gatan, or Frost in that. And so. He's still trying to figure out his lineup, and so I'm not sure what's going on there. But Iowa State's a good team for sure. But they had a reasonably good showing there, I guess. And then UNI, like we said, is in the dome wrestling in the duels.
No, you bring up a good point with Iowa State. They've had to deal with so much this first half of the season, just from injuries and trying to iron things out, get guys in the right spot, and figure out what they're doing. That they've still done well considering everything that they've had to face, and I'm sure hopefully they're close to kind of getting that ironed out. It should be a nice trip to Dresser's former stomping grounds in Virginia,
right
in that area too. So
one thing about injuries, when you start out a season like that, or you have a period of the season like that, when guys start coming back and getting into the lineup, it brings momentum to the guys that are already there, and it's like, oh, good. I'm glad. You don't really say that, but you just get that feeling. It's like, yeah, oh, it's good to have you back, and so they can kind of ride a wave here in January, maybe as people are getting healthy and getting into the lineup.
Oh, definitely, for sure. With that, let's switch gears to high school really quick. Not a lot out there since everybody's kind of getting back from break, but just want to mention I went out to Lisbon on Saturday for the Lisbon Lions Den duels out there. The big duel there was between Lisbon, who came in ranked number 12 in Class 1A against number 8 Mount Vernon. That rivalry has gone back many years. Certainly, our guest Tim Johnson knows a lot about that rivalry between the two programs. But it was Lisbon coming away with a win. They got a pin in the final match from Caleb Brown over number 4 Watson Crobe. Came from behind and got a throw and a fall that sealed the win 39-29 for Lisbon, who improved to 12-0. And they've had a pretty good season so far. They've it's weird to say this, but for Lisbon, it's been kind of a quiet.
I was just thinking the same, yeah.
A lot of focus has been on, the Albernets and Don Boscos and Wiltons of the world. Here is Lisbon, and all they've done is gone 12-0 and just knocked off, a top 8 team in 2A.
Right. I was just thinking quietly as well, and maybe we've been looking the other direction a little bit on Lisbon. So that's shame on me for doing that. And but I wasn't looking too far. Lisbon's always going to be there. For sure.
They're going to be in the mix one way or another. And
right. I have to say I'm a little surprised that they wrestled that meet in the Lisbon duels, because that's generally a full house, pack house meet when they compete. So I'm surprised they did it there, and I don't know if they wrestle each other again.
I'm not sure. I'd have to look. Maybe it was just that was the only way that they're going to be able to manage it, because usually it's, if I remember right, it's usually been right on this side of the break that they would have that non-conference rivalry duel.
I remember you mentioned TJ being involved in that. I remember as a young coach over at Cedar Rapids, Washington, going to watch the meet, and it was some of the competitors in that meet were, of course, the Randalls, the Huffords, Royce Alger from Lisbon. So it was a battle for sure. So what a fun history those two schools have.
Right. Looking at a couple other results. In December, Maquoketa's Zimmerman Invitational, which well, was postponed, and they wrestled that this weekend. Iowa City High came away with the team title. They scored 234.5 points, beating Iowa City Liberty, who was runner-up. They were 62 points behind. The Little Hawks got titles from Kendall Kurtz at 120, Chase Williams at 126, and 190-pounder Blaine Hike. Clear Creek Amana. They went to the West Des Moines Valley duels. They had a nice showing there. They finished second to Indianola. They went 3-1 overall. They beat Muscatine 71-7, Ankeny Centennial 40-35, and then Dallas Center Grimes 43-33. Indy did beat them 41-29. Iowa City West was there as well. They were in a group that all went 2-2. So they essentially tied for third. Kind of looking one of the other duels that kind of stood out from this weekend. Independence wrestled Western Dubuque, and Independence got a pin from 190-pounder Braylon Bieber in the final match. Came down, was tied 33-33, and Bieber got a fall at 190 to win that for Independence 39-33. Mustangs are ranked 6 in 2A, while the Bobcats are number 14 in 3A. So that was a big duel win for Independence.
And did you mention the Solon duels?
I did not.
So I was curious to see the winner. Wilton was first there, and Solon was second, and that duel went 48-29. So reasonably close there. But Wilton's strong. They're tough.
Yep, they're tough, and Solon's got some really good individuals like Jordan Schmidt, Feuerbach at 215. So Solon's got some really strong competitors, and that was a good showing, getting second there in their home duel. Speaking of getting second, Vinton Schellsburg girls, they wrestled at the Denver Invitational. They finished second to Waverly Shell Rock, so good showing for the Vikings. Finished 33.5 points back of the Go Hawks. Chloe Sanders at 140. We know the Sanders family in wrestling, what they've done with Vinton Schellsburg over the last few years. And Sadie Burke at 170, all won titles for Vinton Schellsburg. Ellie Wheats, Cameron Earhart also made the finals there for Vinton. I was just kind of had the opportunity to cover duel on a Tuesday, which doesn't happen very often. Cedar Rapids Kennedy hosted Newton, and Kennedy came away with a big 44-27 dual victory there for their first win of the season. So they're dealing with a lot of injuries and illness, and they've had some young kids step up. Three that are essentially new to the varsity lineup got wins to finish things off, including a couple in their first varsity match. So good showing for Kennedy on Tuesday.
Right, and what do we have coming up this weekend?
The big one on Saturday, the Bobcat Jerry Eckenrod Invitational at Benton Community High School in Van Horn. I have to count, I think about 16 teams in the field.
17, 17 teams.
17.
And
yes, I could take my shoes off to finish counting. So,
you got some loaded teams too. You got Don Bosco, who's number 1 in 1A. You got Union, who's number 4 in 2A. Assumption, number 7 in 2A. Anamosa and West Delaware, 8 and 9 in 2A. And then you've got number 6, Waukee Northwest. They're number 6 in 3A. So some very good teams there. Throw in also Independence, Benton Community, North Lynn, Benton Schellsburg, West Liberty, Williamsburg, and locally Cedar Rapids Jefferson. That's gonna be tough as usual.
Yeah, Williamsburg, which is ranked number 1 in the first coaches dual rankings in Class 2A, part of a loaded WAMAC. Of course, they're coached by Grant Eckenrod, whose father, Jerry Eckenrod, is created the tournament 50-some years ago. Do you know that started as a quad?
I did not know.
All the way back 51 years. Grant, talking to him this week, this tournament started as a quad. and I can't remember the 4 teams he thought were in it. I know he thought LaSalle, the old LaSalle team, was the 4th team there. But one of the things that stands out with this tournament that I'm really going to keep an eye on is the 190-pound bracket, where you have 3 of the top 190-pounders in Class 2A. State champion Austin Scranton from Anamosa, 2-time state medalist Brendan Haying from Benton Community, and then 2-time state medalist Brent Yankovic of West Delaware. Those 3 finished 1, 2, 3 at the Bob Murphy tournament in December. Last week, Anamosa and Benton Community wrestled, I believe, at Osage, where Austin Scranton avenged his only loss to Brendan Haying that came at the Murphy Invitational. He won 1-0 this time. Haying won 2-1 against both Yankovic and Scranton at West Delaware in December. So all 3 of them will be in the bracket there at the Eckenrod, and that should be fun to watch that play out. And of course, there'll be some other guys in that bracket that'll have something to say about it too.
Right. And I don't know, not speaking at this weight class, but generally at all the weight classes, if you might see some wrestlers dropping a weight class now, that their descent plan allows them to do that. So
that's right.
With the couple of weeks they've had at Christmas, the descent plan still kind of works its way down, even though they're not competing. And so,
we can see some of that kind of shift. See some of those shifts.
Exactly. So just something to keep an eye on here in January, early January.
Sure. I am going to be at the Western Dubuque Linmar Duel on Thursday, and of course, I'll be at the Eckenrod on Saturday. Coach, anything else stand out to you, and where are you going to find yourself at this weekend officiating on Saturday?
Other things going on. We got the Linmar duels on Saturday, and then Gary Curtis that features number 3 Wilton and number 2 Alburnett and number 4 Riverside.
Highland?
No, not Highland. Riverside, Oakland, I think it is.
Yeah, but doesn't Highland host the?
At Highland. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, at Highland. Sorry, I should have been more clear.
Yeah, and then the Ames Invitational, and Kennedy and City High will be there. That's always tough. And then I'm at the Anamosa Girls Tournament, and that features Sierra Prairie, Sierra Jefferson, Decorah, East Buck, Independence, Linmar, Mount Vernon, Pleasant Valley. It's a burner for a girls tournament.
That is.
The only one missing. Well, hey, actually, Cedar Falls I thought was there the last year or two, but not this year. Cedar Falls got upset by Raccoon. What is it? Raccoon River something.
Yeah.
Valley or anyway. So that was a big upset over the last week, I think, for the girls. Both of them are ranked nationally. So anyway, that should be a fun tournament in Anamosa.
So I just want to include the Linmar Duels field. Pretty impressive out there. Not only do you have Linmar, Mount Vernon will be there, Clear Creek Amana will be there as well, Western Dubuque, and then Cedar Rapids Xavier. That's a nice little group to go with Pleasant Valley, Marion, and the Mars in that 18 field there. So there'll be some fun duels out at Linmar this weekend.
Right. You might see that Western Dubuque Linmar duel again, huh? Maybe
yeah, right. They might be in different pools, but
yeah, I'm sure they would be. And I forgot to mention, the Tumwa Invitational is a 2-day tournament of 26 teams. Liberty will be there, Iowa City West, and Prairie from our area.
Okay. All right. Any other final thoughts before we close down for today?
No. Thanks, TJ.
All right. Yeah. Thanks to Tim Johnson. Thanks to Becky Gardner for helping us produce this today as well. Dick, pleasure as always. We'd like to thank everybody again for watching. Make sure to keep an eye on that Iowa PBS schedule. Some great duels coming up for you to watch. Tim Johnson, Jim Miller bring you action. Starting January 16th with Nebraska Kearney and Grandview, and then the 21st with Loris and Co. before the Battle of the Bergs and a couple other duels this season. For Dick Briggs, I'm KJ Pilcher. Thanks for watching us. Here's to a great 2025 on the wrestling mat. And Coach Briggs, take us out with our
let's keep wrestling our move.